History of Indonesia in 3 minutes. First humans to arrive in Indonesia were not us. It was Homo erectus about 2 million years ago, way before we even existed. We know this because we found some bones of Homo erectus in Java. We call this guy Java Man. Erectus would have still been around 70,000 years ago when the biggest natural disaster in the history of humanity happened. Volcano Tomba exploded and shot into the atmosphere 3,000 cubic kilometers of stuff. 3,000 cubic kilometers, and caused the next 6 to 10 years on Earth to be winter. It took the whole of humankind this close to the brink of extinction. 50,000 years ago, we arrive on the scene. We walk into Sumatra, we walk down into Java because back then the landmass was much bigger and the sea was much lower. Then we get to Flores and we find a hobbit that catches deer the size of dogs and elephants the size of horses and has to protect himself from dragons. Even better, Sapiens and Florensis cohabit the island for tens of thousands of years. Alright, fast forward to about 2000 BC, it's the turn of the Austronesians who come in from Taiwan. Most modern Indonesians are descendant of these guys. They bring with them rice plantations, ikat weaving, and animal sacrifices, all of which still go on in some place in Indonesia today. Hinduism arrives from India a couple of millennia later, and the Hinduist empires rule the game for over 1,000 years, building beautiful temples like this. By 1400, it's the turn of Islam, who arrive from the Arab world. Soon after, Indonesia attracts the attention of the Europeans. First the Portuguese invade, and about a century later it's the Dutch. Everyone is after one thing: spices. Spices which in those days were worth their weight in gold. People used them to flavor spoiled meat in the days before refrigeration. Doctors used them for medicines. Witches used them for magic. The Dutch are still in power in 1850 when English naturalist Alfred Wallace comes here and independently from Darwin discovers evolution. He sends Darwin a letter, they compare notes, and then they change history. 1942, the war is on. The Japanese invade and seize control, but it's short-lived. 1945, they lose the war and they surrender the power. A man called Sukarno then steps into power and he declares Indonesia free and independent and communist. 20 years later, 1966, there is a coup against him. In the 2 years that led to him getting into power, there is a massive slaughter of communists in Indonesia. Suharto rules for over 30 years, but in 1998, after an economic crisis, he resigns. Within the next 5 years, Indonesia becomes a democracy. Right now, Indonesia is the 4th largest nation in the world and one of the fastest growing economies. It is booming. What's the moral of the story? Indonesia is more than just Bali. Boom!